Hi, I'm Bob Reichert with Woodridge VFW, and I'm here today for this presentation for Woodridge School District 68 and all the schools in that district. We're going to talk about Veterans Day. Veterans Day is always on November 11th. At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, over 100 years ago, the guns of World War I went silent. To celebrate this armistice, a holiday was made of this date. But the world soon learned that the war to end all wars, which we now call World War I, did not. A series of wars followed with increased efficiency in killing. Thus, the holiday was changed to honor everyone who has served in our nation's armed forces. We now call that day Veterans Day. Veterans Day is intended to honor and thank all military personnel who have served in the United States in all wars, particularly living veterans. At one time, all veterans said the following: I, Bob Reichert, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to the regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. Today we honor all veterans who left the comforts and safety of their house and home and served their country. Not just the combat soldiers or the pilots or the cannon cockers. All veterans that served honorably anywhere. Americans live in freedom because of our veterans' courage, dedication to duty, and love of country. On Veterans Day, we honor these brave men and women who have served in our armed forces and defended our nation. Across America, there are more than 25 million veterans. Their ranks include generations of citizens who have risked their lives while serving in military conflicts, including World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf, and the War on Terror. They have fought for the security of our country and the peace of the world. They have defended our founding ideals and protected the innocent and liberated the oppressed from tyranny and terror. They have known the hardships and fears and the tragic losses of war. Our veterans know that the harshest hours of conflict they served were just and honorable purposes. Through the years, our veterans have returned home from their duties to become active and responsible citizens in their communities, furthering contributing to the growth and development of our nation. Their commitment to service inspires all Americans. On Veterans Day, we honor those heroes we have lost, and we rededicate ourselves to the next generation of veterans by supporting our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen as they return home from duty. Our grateful nation must keep our solemn promises to these brave men and women and their families. They have given their unwavering devotion to American people, and we must keep our covenant with them. Our veterans selflessly defended America and its values, asking nothing in return. But it's our responsibility to make sure they're cared for. American veterans have earned every single one of the entitlements we've promised them by making a commitment that 99% of all Americans are simply unwilling to make. With respect for and in recognition of the contributions our servicemen and women have made to the cause of peace and freedom around the world, it's vital that we, as grateful citizens and as a people, take responsibility for preserving the histories of our patriots and our nation's struggles to remain free. Each of us can help in our own unique way to teach, share, celebrate, and nurture the legacy of America's veterans, to pass that on to our children, their children, and those that come after them. I served during the Vietnam War. I enlisted in the United States Air Force in January of 1970, and that was a 4-year enlistment. So I got out of the military, out of the Air Force in January of 1974. After my training and basic training and my school training, I served in Thailand, in northeast Thailand, at an Air Force base, actually a Royal Thai Air Force base known as Nakhon Phanom. Everything in Vietnam or Thailand always has funny names to us here in the States. They were normal, standard names to the people living there. So I served basically in 1972 in NACOM Phanom. I served as an air traffic controller. I assume a lot of you know what that means. If you drive by any airport, here in Chicago we have Midway and O'Hare, you see the control tower. There's controllers up there. And there's also radar controllers. They're located in a building elsewhere. They're not in the actually on the airport. So air traffic controllers talk to the airplanes as they're moving on the ground outside their gates and then clearing for takeoff en route from point A to point B. If they're going from O'Hare to San Francisco, they're talked to all the way, and then landing in San Francisco. So I'm going to show a bunch of slides of my duty in 1972 at NACOM Phanom Royal Thai Air Force Base. I got this slide from a friend coming in for a landing. This is the airport, or actually this is the entire base. A big giant rectangle, and then of course there's security wire all the way around. But there you can see the active runway on the left. There's a parallel taxiway. And then the ramp, and all the supporting people lived in buildings and what we called hooches to support all the stuff we had to do. So where I worked in the radar unit. The unit was located between the active runway and the parallel taxiway, and then between the two middle connecting taxiways. So it's actually in a trailer in a box right in the middle of that grass strip. Our base, there were 6 Air Force bases in Thailand. Our base was search and rescue. Anytime a pilot went down anywhere in Vietnam, north or south, we would send airplanes off of NACOM Phanom to pick them up. Speed was of the essence. We want to pick them up before the bad guy picked them up. So you'll notice here, even though 1972 is modern era, there's a lot of propeller-driven airplanes. This is a whole squadron of A-1s known as Sandys. And what they are, they're an old World War II Korean War plane, heavily modified, but because they're propeller-driven, they could stay and hover slowly over where the downed pilot was and see and protect him. If there were any bad guys there, they would suppress the enemy fire, and the helicopter would come in and try to pick up the pilot and keep the bad guys away. So here's a whole squadron of helicopters. These were not small. These are HH-53s. Nickname was Jolly Green Giant. They had a crew of 5 in the airplane, or in the helicopter. Pilot, co-pilot. There was a load master, someone to take care of the equipment, actually a gunner, and a PJ, a parajumper. Parajumpers are the special forces for the Air Force. That equipment out that you see out in the middle of the screen, that's actually the box I worked in. You can see beyond that, above that, the active runway, and there's a couple of towers there. There's one a little bit on the left. Those are guard towers that protect the security or secure the area of the base. Most of our guards and security forces were National Thais in the Thai Army and Air Force. In the foreground, these are slow World War II planes, C-47s. The first time this plane flew was 1935, and we used them extensively in Vietnam. These were EC-47s, which were electronics. So they went up and tried to jam as many of the enemy signals and radar signals as they could, so we would have the ability to fly right through those. Another version of this plane was the AC, which was an attack plane that was also famous. It was known as Puff the Magic Dragon. So this is where I worked. We went back and forth in that van, Everything is painted bright orange and white. That's standard when you work out in the middle of the runway. But we had our equipment out here, and we actually had a house trailer that was out there where we used to get our drinking water and went to the bathroom and so forth. This was the equipment trailer, or actually two trailers. It's on a little, like a small piece of railway, train railway, and it would rotate. It would rotate on that circle that's out there. So when you're talking about a runway, every slab of concrete or asphalt in the ground is actually two runways. You can come and go either direction. You land and take off into the wind. So depending on what the wind was doing which was the active runway. Those two trailers held all the real heavy-duty equipment. You might recognize the big antenna in the middle. This is, of course, going around and around. This was our regular search radar. The Tootsie Roll that's on top of that is what was called IFF, Identification Friend or Foe. We could tell if the aircraft was ours or theirs. The tall box on the far left was some vertical radar. The last 10 miles of the aircraft's approach coming in, we could tell where he was above or below glide path. So we'd have a two-dimensional view of him coming in, if he was left or right of course, or above or below glide path. The other sticks and looks like spider's webs, those were radio antennas. So we were constantly talking with the airplanes that were up in the ground or up in the air. The other big boxes, of course, all this is hot equipment, so we had built-in air conditioning. So always a mobile unit. If we had to leave or disband this airport, we could do that quickly. Another box off to the side. This looks like a big trailer. It is. Kind of looks like an RV where that slide comes out. That's actually where the air traffic controllers sit. That's where I worked. Again, one advantage of working there for me is having all that equipment. This room was air conditioned. This, of course, we're living in a hot tropic zone, so that was very welcome. This was our guard. Again, we had a Thai guard. He was on our port out there as well. He has an M60 small machine gun. When he's in his bunker there facing outward, that's the direction he's facing. He's facing the outside of the perimeter. And you can see he has two sticks on either side of his M60. That's so he stops and doesn't shoot too far to the left or too far to the right where he might be hitting some friendly fire. This is inside the trailer. It's always dark, so you can look at the scopes. There was a team of 5. We called it a crew. So these were 4 guys I was working at, so I am actually taking the picture. Sitting down on the far end is the crew chief. Just a different angle. I'll show you the scopes in the next picture. This is the board that we look up at. These are the instrument approaches that the aircraft could take or make coming into our airport under less than ideal conditions. So when it was raining or cloudy at night, they would fly these approaches, and there's electronics on the ground aimed up, and there's electronics in the airplane aimed down, and they would match, and then they could guide themselves into the runway and know what altitude they were at. This was that final radar going out. The little markers along the lines there are mileage. This goes out to 10 miles. The lower half of this is telling me if the aircraft is left or right of the center line of the airport or the runway extended out 10 miles. So I could tell the pilot he's left a course or right a course and adjust him appropriately. The upper half of this is him coming down, so it's 3-dimensional. So I could tell if the airplane was above or below the angle he's coming down, known as the glide slope. The dashed line means that's kind of like a warning. All that garbage in the middle there is just ground clutter or it's raining. A radar picks up anything and everything. This is a regular radar scope looking or what the approach controller is looking at. The airport is the dead center of that radar scope. The rings going around are 5 miles, so this scope's set for 40 miles. So the hard lines that come out of the center of our airport are airways or jetways that are in the sky like a map going to other Air Force bases in Thailand. So we would tell them they could take this route, just like you take I-55 to go to St. Louis, or you take this route to go to Ubon or to Udorn or to Tak Lee or to Chiang Mai. The dash line that's kind of circling around there is the country border. So we are in northeast Thailand. Everything on the other side of that dash line is Laos. That would be bad guys. All that garbage up there is actually the mountains of North Vietnam. Again, there's some rain there to the south coming in. We see that as well. So of all this stuff, we could depict what's an airplane, what's our airplane, and what's the bad guys, and then separate them, make sure they have nothing's coming at them, or they're not getting too close to another one that would cause an incident. That's me. I had hair and everything. Not a real busy time. That's me looking like G.I. Joe when we worked at nights, or when we worked, if certain aircraft were coming in that were battle damaged, we had to put on our vests and our helmets because we were out in the middle of the runway or in the middle of the airport. If the airplane skidded off the runway, it could come and bump into our trailers and equipment and so forth. So this is just a picture right in the middle of that circle. That circle is the same 40 miles that you saw a few slides back on the radar screen. So then very close by to us is the border of Laos. If you look on the right-hand side where it says South Vietnam and follow it up to North Vietnam, there's a line in the middle of that. That's the DMZ, or the demilitarized zone. That's what separated the North from the South. And technically our Air Force base, NKP, was north of the DMZ. So if anyone was shot, or I'm talking about airplanes now, if any pilot was hit or damaged or missed their tanker, they would, no matter where they were stationed, South Vietnam or in Thailand, they would come to us first because we were the closest. So we always had, every day we had battle-damaged aircraft just trying to make it back home to the good guys. I put together like a chart of the kind of airplanes we worked. And you look at them real quickly and you see most of them are propeller driven. They're all low and slow, but that's what we needed to do our job. OV-10 Broncos were forward air controllers. These guys carried a light weapon, but they carried a lot of flares and let's see, Willie Pete missiles. Willie Pete is white phosphorus. So they would shoot. We had the technology that we have today didn't exist in 1972. I mean, I bet all you kids have cell phones. They didn't exist. We didn't have computers. We didn't have. You actually had to use a telephone and dial to get to somebody. So the OV-10 Bronco would go up and he'd fire his Willie Pete missiles into the ground, and that's what would bring in the fighters. That was their target. So it was very low technology. I'm going to shoot this missile. When it blows up on the ground, there's a big white cloud. You come in and drop your bombs. That's what we had. Going down, that's an A-1 Skyraider. Those were the planes that would hover and fly around the helicopter when we were picking up a bad guy. Every time, picking up a downed pilot. Every time a pilot went down, we launched a C-130 Hercules. That was the command post. 2 helicopters, 2 CH-53s, the Jolly Green Giants, and 4 Sky Raiders. All that manpower, all that muscle to pick up one guy. But that's the American way of life. If you're a down pilot during Vietnam, you know we're coming to get you. Let's see, below the Jolly Green Giant, AC-119 boxcar. These were really unique. They were sort of like Puff the Magic Dragon. They had miniguns out the side, and they just went out at night. They were painted solid black and went out and tried to disrupt the flow of traffic on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That was the river, the highways, the roads that the North Vietnamese and the Chinese developed to fund and bring in equipment and supplies to the South Vietnamese soldiers. AC-37 Dragonfly, a small jet that was flown by pilots of Thailand. That was their weapon of choice. Very maneuverable, but slow. Upper right is the C-141 Starlifter. We had those land every day. Those brought in replacements, picked up people going back home, and all the supplies and so forth we needed. C-130 Hercules, I think we talked about that. EC-47s, those were electronic jamming. T-39 Saberliners, those are what the generals and the colonels, that were their own special airplanes for their kind of private use. And an F-4 Phantoms, that was the #1 fighter jet of the war. Although none were stationed at our base, we had a lot land and take off because, again, we were the first base or closest base to get them home or get them on the ground if we had to refuel them or fix them up to go back to their home base. I'm standing outside the radar control unit and just looking down to the nearest runway. So there's a fire truck. So there's a fire station on base, and the fire trucks would always come out when there was an emergency and so forth. We had so many emergency landings, the fire truck just stayed there. They didn't even go back to back to their home base or back to their garage because they'd be called right back out again. And there's a helicopter. I don't know if he's coming in or taking off. C-130 just coming in or taking off, same thing. Fire truck is still there. There's an EC-47 that's going down the taxiway. He's getting ready to take off. In the distance, you can see those black airplanes. Those are the AC-119s, the gunships. I never got any closer than that. My security clearance didn't allow me to walk over there. Might be hard to see, but there's an OV-10 Bronco on the runway. He's just landed. He's right in front of that security tower. He's just coming in from one of his maneuvers. This is a static. We had an A-1 Sandy just sitting on the base. It was just there because they put it there. It just kind of looks as a display. Again, big propeller, single fighter, single seat. All the weaponry it could carry underneath. Some of those big tubes are fuel, extra fuel, so you could hold over the area. But he had 4 machine guns, 2 on each wing, and a bunch of other, whatever he wanted to load up with to do whatever mission he was going to do. So it kind of looks like a small airplane. So here's the same airplane with me sitting on the landing gear. That's really, really big above me. You got to climb on a ladder to get up to the wing, and then the pilot would then crawl up some little flanges that came out. That big tube in the middle, that again is gas. The others underneath the wing were all different assortment of bombs. There's an F-4 Phantom that had just landed. You see this mixture of this is actually part of the taxiway and the ramp are those plate steel pieces that they kind of all clip together like Legos. So the ramp was made out of, wasn't a hard surface, it was just these steel plates on top of the dirt and the clay. This is our living quarters. They call these hooches. You notice they're all above ground. We're on a little bit of a slope here. The reason for that is it started raining around April, and it stopped around September. It's a tropic country. I'm sure everyone has probably seen Forrest Gump, and Forrest would describe the rain. It came down hard, it came down light, it came down at you, came down behind you. Well, everything was up above the ground because of the rainy season. So each hooch had, I think there were 5 rooms. Each room had up to 4 guys or 4 airmen in there. You see some across the way there with actual air conditioning. Well, that was the officers. The officers' quarters were always better than the enlisted quarters. This is the same picture during the rainy season. It would just, rain like crazy almost every day. That big bunker off to the side there, that was used when our base was getting hit. Now, we didn't get hit that often because we didn't have a whole lot of bad guys in Thailand. The Thais made sure of that. And if there were bad guys, they weren't coming after people or the airmen. They were going on the airport trying to blow up the airplanes or trying to blow up our fuel or trying to blow up our munitions supply. But those boxes or those big steel bunker there, that's 8 feet tall, 8 feet wide, and it's all filled with clay and a very narrow opening in the middle. So that's where we would go in the middle if we were under attack. And of course, no shrapnel or bombs or bullets would penetrate the steel and 8 foot of clay. So a nice place to be safe when trouble was there. We had a lot of these running around. Everybody says, "Oh, isn't that cute?" But if you look to the lower left side of the screen there, it's the same thing as we have here in Woodridge. We got geese all over the place, and we have a mess all over the place. And that's my door right behind, so if I'm coming out in my flip-flops to go to the bathroom, well, you got to watch out for the landmines, so to speak. And these are just ringtail monkeys. They were as common as squirrels. Our hooch actually had a pet monkey. This is a gibbons. Actually, that's an ape because it doesn't have a tail. And we kind of befriended this one, and as you can see, I'm the one on the left. He kind of befriended us as well. It was a female, but his name or her name was George. George of the Jungle. In the distance there on the right, that's my houseboy. In the Air Force, we had, in hooches like this, this young man would take care of all my laundry, my shoes, would shine my shoes, keep all my stuff neat, keep our room picked up and cleaned every single day. Again, there were 5 rooms, up to 4 guys in a room. So there could be a mess, but he would straighten everything up. And back in '72, I paid this guy $5 a month. And that was good wage for him. So it was very, very poor country. So every airman paid him $5 a month. So you can multiply that out, and that would be his pretty much yearly salary. That's what he needed to sustain his family and presence. You always had to let off some steam, so these are actually Thais riding water buffalo. And you can't see it really well, but there's something painted on the side of that water buffalo. So we had races. We would just race, water buffalo around, and fun things to do. This was the main street in the base, and it was kind of a downhill. So there's no date on this. This was probably around Memorial Day, so this was our way of celebrating the Indianapolis 500. So we had like a soapbox derby kind of competition. This is supposed to look like a telephone. You can see where the receiver was taken off. And I'm not sure who the driver was. But that's our communications emblem on his left side going into the race. One of those crazy maps right in the middle of the base. You can see, we were only 8,700 miles from Chicago. Just kind of reminded you of where you were, and everything's pointed one way except for NKP. 12 miles was the actual city of NKP. Everything else was, let's go home. See, this is a map of Thailand, and there's all the 6 bases. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All these 7 bases. One was actually a supply base and didn't have any aircraft on it. But upper right, you see Nakhon Phanom. And in all the rest, again, unique names. Utapao, Takli, Karat, Ubon, Udorn. And there you see Laos and Cambodia and North Vietnam. Just for reference. These were all the Air Force bases actually in South Vietnam. Again, all unique, funny names. Let's see, the base I was at would be way up on top, just across the river that separates Laos from Thailand. It's not on there because this is a map of Vietnam, but we would be north of that DMZ line on the top of the map. So many, many Air Force bases, obviously a lot of airmen serving in the Vietnam War. That, in fact, is the last slide. So that was my how I spent 1972 during the Vietnam War.